Welcome to the Grow Your Law Firm podcast, brought to you by Pilma. This podcast helps lead lawyers to more growth, profit, and freedom. Here is your legal marketing expert and host, Ken Hardison.
Well, hello, everyone. This is Ken Hardison, and welcome to another episode of Grow Your Law Firm. And today we have Russ Adler with Lawyer Better. Welcome, Russ.
Hi, Ken. Thank you so much for having me on. I appreciate it.
Yeah. So one of our masterminds, we just had a mastermind meeting up at Lake Tahoe at the Ritz-Carlton for a beach guy like me. It was different. We saw snow, so it was interesting. But one of our mastermind members was bragging on you, Russ. And I said, well, I would love to have him on my podcast. So tell us your story, like what you do, how'd you get there? Just kind of bring us up to where you are today.
Sure. Thank you. So I'm a mindset and performance coach. I work with lawyers and law firms. By way of background, I was a civil trial lawyer for 27 years through 2013 down here in South Florida. Aggressive, plaintiff side only. I tried over 200 cases to verdict. We found that the quickest way to build a reputation and really help people get what they deserve is to go to trial. And I was always very enthusiastic about that. And then after I stopped practicing about 10 years ago, I went into the coaching space, working with law firms, especially younger lawyers, and helping them figure out what their challenges are, what's holding them back, what their barriers are, and working with them to help them get past these problems. It could be arrogance. It could be problems with anger, blaming others, pushing back on feedback, things that I'm sure all of your members have experienced as firm owners or managing partners or just employers. We've all been there. And I was there myself for 27 years. I was a tough customer until I finally saw the light. But what I see is, look, there's a lot of coaches out there and a lot of consultants out there. One of my big differentiators, to be clear up front, is I do not offer practical training, how to take a deposition, how to try a case, how to do this, or even how to grow your law firm and your revenues. I know you're the master of that, and I'm honored to be here. But I work with the lawyers, again, the sooner the better, to pretty much identify their struggles, what their problems are, what's holding them back. And I've had a lot of great results for the past 10 years doing that. And so in order to scale up and help even more people, I came up with this course, the Mindset Upgrade course for lawyers. Half of it is going through and giving structure and definition to the struggles that lawyers have. It might be with good or positive attitudes like objectivity, open-mindedness, willingness, humility, but we all know people who struggle with those positive things. And then we have a whole long list of the negative things, the arrogance, the blaming others, passive-aggressive, schadenfreude, when we take pleasure in other people's losses or grief, and other things like that. So we try to identify that, and we help lawyers, once they identify what they struggle with, go through the process of changing their thinking to change their behavior. Because whether it's a bad attitude or a bad trait we have, or just a bad behavior, there's always thoughts behind it. And going back and unpacking that and challenging those thoughts, that's a great way to change your behavior. It actually works. The other part of my course is the Neuro-Linguistic Programming, NLP. I was trained in that 20 years ago out in California. I thought it would help make me a better trial lawyer, and it did. And it helped me in all aspects of my life. And it turns out that NLP is great for helping lawyers resolve their own issues, for dealing with themselves, but especially with dealing with others. And I've done great things with it, even in many of the cases that I've tried. So that's what the course is about.
Yeah, I want to talk to you about NLP separately, but I want to go back to, so here's a complaint that I hear in my masterminds is that they'll say, hey, you don't got any answers for how to get these associates motivated? You know, I mean, do you deal with that, like how to get them motivated? I mean, or what it takes to get to those, or maybe they don't want to be. I don't know. I mean, I'm just asking. I mean, do you run into that?
Of course. That's something I deal with all of the time. Ever since 2020, when COVID hit, since then, the practice of law really changed fundamentally. And for any young lawyers who were barred around 2020 or after, a lot of their experiences now are on Zoom. They're remote proceedings. There's no more going to the courthouse and having coffee and, just talking to your friends and building these relationships and building the soft skills. At least down here in South Florida, most depositions are on Zoom, mediations are on Zoom. You might have a special set hearing that's live, and trials are mostly going back to live now. But if you think about it, a lot of the stuff that we take for granted, that when we were younger, the whole face-to-face interaction, the soft skills, that was a big part of our development. They don't have that. There's been arrested development of younger lawyers since 2020 at least, and that plays into their motivation. And on top of that, there's a lot of generational characteristics that I hear about that young lawyers, and I see it myself. They feel very entitled. They don't have the same work ethic. They only really care about themselves. They try to find workarounds. I was just talking to a lawyer yesterday at a big defense firm who's having these issues with a whole bunch of his associates, and he'd like to send them to the course. So it's not centric to plaintiff or defense or even to practice area. It turns out that all young lawyers struggle with something or the other. And I just try to straighten them out so that when the practical training starts, when handling cases starts and all of that, these lawyers are hopefully one step ahead of their peers, having had this mindset upgrade.
You got to have the right mindset for anything. It's like I tell lawyers, sometimes I give the speech, the 7 keys to scaling your law firm. Well, you know what the number one is? It's mindset. You know what I'm saying? You got to have the right mindset. You can't have the mindset that, oh, I can't do this, or all the reasons I can't do this. You got to have a positive attitude. And one thing I was thinking about the things you were saying about, helping them be better, this and this. I don't know if you ever read this book. The listeners, you ought to read this book. It's anything he's written. Patrick Lencioni, he wrote like the 5 dysfunctions of a team, but he also picked about how to find an A player, how to hire an A player. And an A player is somebody that's humble but confident. Okay. And I think that makes a good lawyer, don't you? And they got to be people smart. People smart means they know how to communicate with people without pissing them off. You know what I'm saying? They're people smart. They know how to get things done. And I'm trying to think of the third one. Humble, people smart. Oh, they're hungry, but not just for money, to grow professionally and be more tomorrow than they are today. I mean, grow money wise too, but hungry for money, but not that be not the number one thing, maybe the number 2 thing. And if you can find people like that, you can help convert these associates into those attributes. I think what you're doing is worth gold. I mean, I'll be honest with you. Do it for anybody.
I appreciate that, and I agree. We just launched the course, but based on my experience, what I've seen, I don't know if there's too much else like this that's out there right now in the space. There are some mindset courses, there's a few NLP courses, but this pulls it all together, and it really works well together. For young lawyers, some of them are just not likable. And a lot of it's because they have these struggles from their past when they grew up or who they hung out with or whatever. And they bring all that baggage to the law firm, where the partner and the boss is ready to throw them into the game and throw them into depots and cases. And I think trial by fire, that's how a lot of us were trained. And today that will work with some people. Everyone's looking for that perfect associate that you described. There are very few of them. It's kind of like unicorns. But the good news is that people who have a fixed mindset, for instance, there's a lot of them. These are the ones who think that they know everything, who are resistant to feedback, who give you pushback. I'm sure that sounds familiar to a lot of your members. Well, guess what? A fixed mindset can be changed into a growth mindset. And the growth mindset is where law firms really want to be. It's where there's collaboration. It's when there's feedback. It's when the synergies are really achieved and law firms prosper. But a lot of people have fixed mindsets. And again, if that's not addressed early on and it gets baked in, I'm sure we all know lawyers, 20, 30, 40-year lawyers who are just jerks. They're not likable, right? They have issues and they're just a pain in the ass to be around. It's kind of sad. No one ever got to them and showed them the way. And if they're not getting in a lot of business, well, that's why they're not likable. We all know how important likability is. That's a big focus of my course.
Let me ask you this. Have you ever went to a law firm and worked with one of those associates and you just walked there and said, this guy's definition of narcissistic. There's no way I can help him because, there are some people that can't be helped. I really believe that. I mean, or maybe they don't want to be helped, but you ever run into that?
Yes. Well, at the end of the day, Ken, I can give people the tools they need and the structures they need, the techniques they need to resolve their problems and to become better communicators and better lawyers. But it all comes down to having the willingness. If they are not willing to change, ultimately, nothing that you do is going to really help them. So yes, I've coached a lot of lawyers. I've helped them get out of a lot of deep holes and really improve their lives and make things better for them by rewiring, upgrading the software in their brain, changing some default settings that a lot of them have. But yes, I have told a few lawyers from time to time, respectfully, I just don't think you're coachable. I don't think you want to change. You're not even willing to listen to what I'm suggesting that you consider. I don't tell people to do things. I use permissive language patterns, by the way. That's an NLP technique, among others.
Yeah, I want to get into that in a minute. So it's funny, you were talking about just my wife and this morning, we were talking about something, and she said, well, a leopard can't change its, or what is it, the spots or whatever. I said, well, I disagree. I said, if they really want to, really want to, I think they can. But if they don't really deeply want to, I said, it's just like quitting smoking or losing weight. You got to really want it. It's like I have lawyers all the time, well, you got a great course and all this, Ken, but I just don't have time. And I just got to where I just flat rate tell them, you have time. You just choose not to make time, because whatever is important to you will make time for it. And my wife caught me on it about a month ago. I said, well, I just don't have time. She said, no, you choose not to make time. I said, you're exactly right. So she listens to me all the time. Says, yes, she's pushing it back on me. But it's the truth. We make time for what we really want to do. I think in life, listen, if I really want to do something, I'm going to do it, man. Come hell or high water, I'm going to make it happen. That's just the way I am.
Yep. That's one of the reasons why the entire course is available in audio format, so lawyers can listen in the car. I listen to a lot of stuff in the car. I know other people do. But Ken, what I see in firm after firm, and these are really successful firms making a lot of money, is that they are so caught up in whatever cases are pending right now, whatever is set for trial right now, whatever they're negotiating right now, that is their source of income and survival. That is where all of the focus goes. And some of these firms, for years and years, they feel that way to the point where they neglect their infrastructure. Okay, a lot of them don't even have processes. They don't have rules and regulations. They don't have operations handbooks, or they don't configure their FileVine or whatever software they're using because they're so busy printing money, thinking that everything is honky-dory, that they're really laying the groundwork for failure and for mistakes. That's what I see. So to say that if you stop and invest in your most valuable asset, which is your lawyers, that can really help. And that's why I've already received interest from some firms who are looking at it for onboarding purposes. Do it while the ink is still wet on their law degree. And large firms, I know that they struggle, and I'm sure smaller firms do as well, with things like retention, dissatisfaction, misalignment of expectations, right? I'm sure entitlement has something to do with that. These young lawyers may think that they walk in and everything is there for them and it's easy street. Well, we all know that that's not the case.
I used to have a question I'd ask potential lawyers, especially the ones coming out of law school. I'd say, would you rather work 40 hours a week and make 60,000 or work 60 hours a week and make 100,000? It gave me a good clue on how hungry they were for money part anyway.
Sure.
And then always ask them, where do you see yourself in 5 years, 3 years, 5 years? What do you want to be doing? Things like that. So I want to get into this what is it? How you pronounce it?
Neuro-Linguistic Programming, NLP.
Yeah. My first experience, I don't want you to explain what it is and everything, but my first experience was I hired this Tony Robbins coach probably about, 15 years ago. And he's a good friend now. He's not with Tony anymore. In fact, but he does what I do for a dentist now. But as far as coaching them and trying to teach them how to grow their practices. But he was real smooth. He really did a good job selling me. And I said, how'd you do it? He said, it's NLP. And he started telling me all about it. And I think it's something that intake people could use a lot. People trying to close sales. I don't know. You tell me. I think
okay.
Yeah. So go ahead and tell it, because I'm not an expert on it. I've never took the course, anything. I just know what it's about.
Sure. So NLP is something that was created in the 70s, and it's based on half on hypnosis, Ericksonian hypnosis, and half on psychology. Okay. And it is a very powerful thing to study and to learn and to adopt into your life. It has become not only the basis for pretty much all sales training. Anytime you go to a car dealership or you're dealing with a really good salesman, they're using NLP. Tony Robbins is huge on NLP. He uses it. And I will suggest that all lawyers who are even decent at what they do, if not great at what they do, they're all using NLP too. But most of them don't even realize that they're using it. And the whole point about NLP is to map yourself to whoever you're talking to in a way. And of course, this is all explained in the course. But basically, instead of selling people and trying to get them to do something, or like a jury trying to get them to give you money, wouldn't it be better if you speak to them and deal with them in a way that makes them want to do for you what you want them to do, that makes the jury want to give you money without you trying to have to convince them or sell them? So it's really a way of communicating with people's unconscious mind versus their conscious analytical mind, and sending things like embedded commands. And it all breaks down to terminology, but it really all comes down to is the nonverbal aspects of communication, which they say is 93%, right? As well as the communication part, the way that we message, the way that we talk to others, and being able to get into and out of rapport with other people. And rapport, for those who may not know, is simply a feeling of connection. And with that comes trust and believability and credibility and all of the things that lawyers want, either whether with a prospective client, with a jury, with a judge, with opposing counsel. And all I can tell you is I speak from experience, because for about 10 years of my career, I used this and it became integrated. And it was really, really powerful stuff. One more thing I'd like to throw in about NLP. I'm sure a lot of your members are familiar, and I'm sure you're familiar with the classic book, The Reptile, right? By
Yes.
Don Keenan and David Ball. It came out in 2009.
Right.
So The Reptile is essentially based on NLP. Okay. It's a way of messaging to juries that appeals to certain primal instincts and our needs. And it's a brilliantly written book. Well, The Reptile has been blamed by the defense bar for nuclear verdicts, this is a term they've come up with. They batted around. There's a podcast episode from my podcast, the Interesting Lawyers podcast, from Dan Santinello. He has a national defense firm, probably about 300 lawyers. And he blames, and he said the industry blames that book on nuclear verdicts. Okay. So essentially, they're blaming the use of NLP on these giant nuclear verdicts. I think that speaks loudest for the applicability of NLP. So if that's the case, and if these defense firms, Dan Santinello's firm, they have like these anti-reptile committees where they will, and he talks about this openly, where they'll discuss these issues and how the plaintiff is going to try to reptile it and how they can anti-reptile it. Okay. So my point is, why not teach these basic skills to lawyers? Look, we all use some of these skills, right? You know what a reframe is, Ken, right? You know what, maybe you probably know what an anchor is, things like that. We hear these things. By giving structure and definition to the NLP tools, lawyers can articulate those and use them for even more, right? And part of my course is membership in the Lawyer Better community, where they can interact with other like-minded lawyers and practice the NLP techniques and discuss these things and promote it. So that's the track that I'm on. And I'm confident that NLP is going to really continue to take off now that it's been defined and given some structure and some recognition from a teaching point of view.
Yeah. I was looking at your website before we started today, and it looks like your course is made up like 5 sections, 5 or 6. I can't remember.
6 sections, 6
Okay.
phases.
Do you mind just, you got to go all the detail, just kind of name them off?
Yeah. The early sections basically define in some depth and detail about how our minds work and how our minds work with our reticular activating system. So it gets into a bit of the neuroscience about how we think and how our brains try to protect us and preserve the status quo and hold us back. And the moral of that story is don't always listen to your brain. And then it gets into the things that people struggle with. And it really goes through each of these things: objectivity, open-mindedness, humility. It goes on, and all the negative things as well. And there's a whole bunch of video clips in there from me of coaching nature, short form video, that TikTok length, 2 minutes or less, because I want people to actually watch it, right? And then they identify their problems. I take them through the process of how to change their thinking and their behavior. And then we talk about some communication essentials, things like soft skills, things like nonverbal communication. We go through all of these building blocks. And then the course gets into the NLP tools and techniques, explaining the basis. Some lawyers, they take an intellectual interest in this. They want some detailed information about what this is about, how it works, and why it's for them. So we answer all of those questions, and we give a lot of examples and use cases about how that is done. And then after that, we talk about some basic skills and techniques and ways of thinking that lawyers can use going forward to minimize their stress in their everyday life. I have some articles I've written called The Tai Chi Approach to Litigation, which kind of speaks for itself. Going with the flow, being like kelp. Some philosophical things like that. We touch on concepts everywhere from Zen Buddhism to Stoicism, and just some schools of thought that I have found useful on a forward-looking basis. And then finally, at the end of the course, there's an area where people can set goals. They're called SMART goals, things that they want to get rid of, behaviors they want to get rid of. It might just be saying, some people say, well, and that can become an issue in front of a jury. And it might be something as simple as that, or it might be, being nicer and being more focused and listening to people and actively listening versus distraction. And that's really become a huge problem in today's economy. I know everyone can relate to that one, especially with these young lawyers who have, 10 different things going on at one time, right? And so we talk about that and goal setting. And then after that, lawyers are welcome to stay in the community if they want to keep interacting with other people. I think they get 6 months of complimentary membership. And we also offer coaching packages for the group. There's a 6-part live group coaching part of the course. So with or without the coaching package, this is the best way that I've figured out to get my message out there at scale, because I really think this is needed and there's not a lot out there that addresses it.
No, I don't know of anybody else that's doing what you're doing. Probably will in 2 or 3 years. It'll be 10 of them, but right now I always like to go with the first. They're always usually the best. So if somebody wants to learn more about this program or what you do and how you do it, what's a good way for them to get up with you, Russ?
Visit my website, lawyerbetter.com. They can feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm very active on LinkedIn, and also on Facebook, just my name, and join the conversation. I'm putting a lot of promotional material out there right now, and I know that these are things that resonate with lawyers. I know where the pain points are for people who own and run firms and are thinking about the next generation or even succession. And it's kind of scary out there. And the other thing is, I hear from a lot of judges that these young lawyers today, they're argumentative, they're rude, they're disrespectful. It's not the way it used to be. And maybe, just maybe, that has to do with the fact that, you can't train lawyers and you can't teach them soft skills using Zoom. And I think that has a lot to do with it, along with all the generational challenges that we face.
Well, listen, I really appreciate any parting words you want to leave on the way out here today. Any words of wisdom?
Yes. As I said earlier, when it comes to things like working on people's mindset, lawyers are like cement. When they're wet and they were just poured, they're easy to mold. As they get older, you got to get out the jackhammer sometimes. It's tough. Attitudes become burnt in and they become traits. These things can all be worked with. I've dealt with a lot of difficult situations, but the sooner, the better. Okay. And the old saying, hard work pays off in the future. Laziness pays off now. Or as my mother used to say, because I used to be a big procrastinator, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. I think this is a timely idea, and the sooner that people get involved with it and fix these things, the easier it's going to be and the better outcome they're going to get.
Thank you so much, Russ. Until next time, this is Ken Hardison, dedicated to your success.
You have been listening to the Grow Your Law Firm podcast, the podcast that leads lawyers to more growth, profit, and freedom. Go to growyourlawfirm.com to find more ways to market and manage your law firm. Please leave us a rating and review wherever you listen to your podcasts.